Chapter 1. Trump in a private call with Zelensky. The leak landed like a phosphorus grenade in the already volatile atmosphere of Washington, D.C., igniting every newsroom, back channel, and political war room within minutes of its appearance. It wasn't just a scandal, it was a geopolitical shockwave. Word had spread that in a private call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, former President Trump had floated a jaw-dropping proposal: American ownership of Ukrainian power plants. The implications were staggering, both in their audacity and timing. Ukraine, still in the throes of war and reliant on Western support, had become a symbol of democratic resistance. To suggest, even obliquely, that its critical infrastructure should be privatized by American corporations under the guise of strategic partnership Senator Chuck Schumer, never one to miss a well-timed microphone, stood at the top of the Capitol steps, surrounded by a swarm of cameras and reporters, his face contorted in a mix of fury and theatrical precision. "Treason," he spat, his voice amplified by righteous indignation, the word cracking through the air like a gunshot. This isn't diplomacy. Trump is handing over Ukrainian sovereignty on a silver platter while lining his own pockets with blood-stained contracts. The imagery was vivid, the message unambiguous, and the networks ate it up. News channels broke into regular programming with breaking banners ablaze in red, their split screens showing Schumer's outrage alongside carefully selected audio clips from the leaked call, each excerpt edited for maximum damage. CNN's Caitlin Collins, poised behind the White House press podium later that afternoon, delivered the next volley. Her tone was sharp, relentless, as she zeroed in on Karoline Leavitt, Trump's press secretary, who stood at the podium with the stiff composure of someone cornered in a minefield. "Ms. Leavitt," Collins began, her voice cutting through the room like a scalpel, "is the president suggesting a corporate raid on a nation under siege? Is this about strategic interests or simply about securing Ukrainian assets for American gain?" The question, laced with moral outrage and forensic precision, struck like a dart. Flashbulbs popped. The room held its breath. Every answer, every hesitation, every nuance in Leavitt's reply would now be parsed by pundits and politicians alike, all while the global stage looked on with sharpened attention. The scandal wasn't just a domestic problem, it was international, and its consequences were about to spiral well beyond anyone's control. Chapter 2. Absolutely not, Caitlin Caroline Leavitt, poised and unflinching despite the blinding lights and the press corps' rising bloodlust, met Caitlin Collins' gaze with unwavering calm. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. She'd been briefed, armored in rhetoric, and more importantly, she knew the real battle was not in that briefing room, but in the perceptions shaped beyond it. "Absolutely not, Caitlin," she said crisply, her voice cutting through the murmurs and camera clicks with practiced authority. President Trump was speaking from a position of strength and strategic foresight. Ukraine's energy infrastructure is vulnerable, painfully so. Russian missile strikes have crippled large swaths of the grid, plunging cities into darkness and chaos. The president offered a solution: American expertise, American capital, deployed not for conquest, but for stabilization, to guarantee security, functionality, and long-term resilience. What's the alternative? Sit back and watch Russia turn the lights off in Kyiv again and again? The room shifted, some reporters scribbling furiously, others watching Collins, waiting for the counterpunch. And of course, it came. "But ownership, Ms. Leavitt?" Collins asked, arching her brows in that signature blend of disbelief and calculated provocation. "Isn't that annexation by another name?" The question hung in the air like a charge, electric and dangerous. Caroline felt the familiar prickle of frustration just beneath her composed exterior. This was the trap, the carefully laid narrative that Schumer had seeded hours earlier, now germinating in the hands of a willing media echo chamber. Collins, sharp and relentless, was simply the vessel. "American ownership would be a protection, Caitlin," Caroline replied, her tone sharpening slightly as she leaned in, pivoting the narrative with precision. "A shield, not a seizure. Think about it. Would Putin dare target infrastructure owned and protected by American corporations? Would he risk direct confrontation with U.S. stakeholders? No. That's the deterrent. That's the difference between a fragile ally left exposed and a fortified partner under our economic umbrella. This isn't imperialism, it's strategic stabilization. And if we're serious about defending Ukraine's sovereignty, Then we need to ensure it survives long enough to enjoy that sovereignty. American investment, yes, including ownership stakes, is how we get there. She paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of her words settle, daring the room to challenge her on the logic. But the seed had been planted, and now it was a matter of how fast it would grow or explode. Chapter 3. Trump, pacing like a caged tiger, watched the news coverage with a grim satisfaction. Behind the scenes, deep within the fortified walls of the West Wing's Situation Room, the atmosphere crackled with tension and barely contained triumph. Trump paced the narrow space like a caged tiger, his steps sharp, his eyes fixed on the bank of monitors streaming news coverage from every major network, each one broadcasting a fresh volley of outrage over the leaked Ukraine call. And yet, beneath the surface fury of the headlines, Trump saw something else, momentum shifting, narratives beginning to crumble. "Schumer's losing his mind," he muttered, half to himself and half to the room, a crooked smile tugging at his lips. "Good. Let him expose himself. Cotton's right. He's peddling pure lies." The president's tone was casual, even amused, but his eyes, narrowed, calculating, betrayed the tactical mind already working 3 moves ahead. Senator Tom Cotton, who sat to his right with the rigid composure of a man forged in the fires of national security briefings and geopolitical chess games, had delivered the critical intel just hours earlier. As one of the most hawkish voices on the Hill, Cotton had access to sources most senators could only dream of, and they had uncovered something damning. In a closed-door meeting with top Democrat senators and a carefully curated group of sympathetic journalists, Schumer had explicitly instructed his allies to label Trump's proposal as collusion with Putin and a betrayal of Ukrainian sovereignty, knowing full well the words would detonate across the media landscape like political C4. "It wasn't a misunderstanding," Cotton assured the room. "It was orchestration, pure manipulation designed to trigger a public frenzy and shift the narrative." Cotton, whose distaste for such gamesmanship was barely veiled, had come straight to Trump with the revelation. "They're desperate, sir," he had said earlier that morning in the Oval Office, his tone grim, his jaw tight. "They see this as their path back into control. They're ignoring the strategic logic of your proposal, the actual benefit to Ukraine's grid and economy, and instead they're going for blood. Just scream treason loud enough, they think, and people will forget the facts." Trump had nodded slowly, then faster, letting the clarity of it all harden his resolve. "Let them scream," he said now, turning to Caroline Leavitt, who stood near the doorway, phone in hand, already coordinating the next volley of press responses. "Caroline, you're doing a great job. Stay on it. Keep hitting them with the truth. Remind every network, every anchor, every voter that this is about security first. American expertise, Ukrainian stability, that's the story. And frankly," he added, stepping closer, his voice lowering into that familiar conspiratorial intensity he reserved for inner circle moments, "it's also about a damn good deal for America. We've poured billions into Ukraine. It's time we see something real in return. Energy independence, leverage, access to critical minerals, lithium, rare earths, the building blocks of the next century. This isn't charity, it's strategic investment. And the American people will understand that if we don't let the media poison the well."
We do not seek to impose our way of life on anyone, but rather to let it shine as an example. We will shine.
Chapter 4. Trump was playing chess while Schumer was playing checkers. Caroline understood the game being played, and more importantly, she understood who was winning. Trump wasn't reacting. He was orchestrating. While Schumer shouted into microphones with one-note fury, stuck in the stale rhythm of Trump bad, Putin good, Caroline saw clearly that he and the rest of the Democratic leadership were trapped in a simplistic, outdated narrative that no longer matched the evolving geopolitical terrain. They were playing checkers on a board that had long since become a chessboard, where every move had cascading consequences, and Trump was several moves ahead. The Democrats, in their blind outrage, were underestimating the resonance of realpolitik with an American public increasingly jaded by slogans and hungry for results. At the next press briefing, Caroline walked into the room with renewed clarity, armed not just with talking points, but with a counter-narrative grounded in facts, strategy, and moral pragmatism. She took the podium and, with practiced poise, steered the conversation directly to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, Europe's largest nuclear facility, currently under Russian occupation and a persistent source of global anxiety. President Zelensky expressed specific concern about Zaporizhzhia, Caroline began, her voice cool, deliberate, firm. He understands, as any responsible leader would, the immense danger of a nuclear facility operating under hostile control. The risks are not theoretical. We are one missile strike away from a catastrophe with global consequences. Cameras clicked, pens scribbled, and reporters leaned in. President Trump offered a concrete solution, she continued, a mechanism to ensure the facility's safety, to recover it, and, to use President Zelensky's own words, bring it under stable, secure management. That's not aggression, that's responsibility. Isn't that what everyone wants? The question wasn't rhetorical. It was a challenge, aimed directly at the lazy cynicism that had dominated the discourse. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the narrative began to shift. Independent analysts, initially hesitant to break with the prevailing outrage, started to weigh in with nuance. Security experts on late-night panels began referencing the real danger posed by Russian control of Zaporizhzhia. Articles emerged on Substack and in niche policy journals, questioning the hysterical framing of American involvement as annexation. The truth was plain, if one chose to see it. Ukrainian energy security was paramount, not just for Ukraine, but for the stability of Europe. Russia's grip on Zaporizhzhia was a ticking time bomb. If America, through its expertise and investment, could neutralize that risk without firing a shot, was that not worth consideration? Unconventional? Yes. But what in this war wasn't? The more the facts circulated, the more Schumer's accusations began to appear politically motivated, reactionary, even reckless. And Caroline, standing firm at the podium, refusing to retreat from complexity, had planted the seed that would make that shift possible. She wasn't just defending a policy, she was reframing the battlefield. Chapter 5. Then came Elon Musk. In a move as calculated as it was catalytic, Elon Musk fired off a tweet that shifted the political landscape with the force of a tectonic jolt. Posted at peak media traffic hour and crafted with the precision of a headline, his message cut through the noise. American ingenuity and investment can revitalize Ukraine's energy grid. Partnering with Ukraine to upgrade their infrastructure, leveraging Tesla Energy Solutions and American technical expertise is not just strategic, it's the right thing to do. Security through strength and innovation. Coming from Musk, who was, at once, a tech messiah, a market mover, and a political enigma, the endorsement exploded across platforms, instantly reframing the conversation. What had been painted by opponents as a Trump-backed corporate land grab was now recast in the glossier light of innovation diplomacy. Suddenly, the story wasn't about annexation or backroom deals. It was about American leadership, about rebuilding a war-torn democracy with cutting-edge solutions and entrepreneurial might. News outlets, ever addicted to the next compelling narrative, began to pivot, hungry to chase this new angle. Interviews with nonpartisan energy experts began surfacing, highlighting how American private sector involvement, particularly from companies like Tesla, could accelerate Ukraine's energy recovery tenfold compared to sluggish bureaucratic aid packages. They spoke of modular power systems, grid resilience, and sustainable deployment, and for the first time in days, the discourse felt less like a partisan war zone and more like a policy revolution. Yet not everyone was ready to surrender the old narrative. Caitlin Collins, ever the sharp-eyed inquisitor, pressed Caroline again during the next press briefing, trying to regain the offensive. Ms. Levitt, even with Musk's support, isn't this still about accessing Ukrainian critical minerals? Is that the real motivation here? The room bristled with anticipation, but Caroline was ready. Her smile was thin, but her tone was steel. Caitlin, strategic partnerships benefit all parties, she replied, her voice calm but edged with conviction. Ukraine has resources essential for the future: lithium, rare earths, energy assets that are critical to global supply chains. America has the expertise and capital to help develop them sustainably, transparently, and securely. Is it so wrong for both nations to benefit from a mutually beneficial agreement? Or would you prefer we leave those resources vulnerable for Putin to seize and weaponize against the West? The question, rhetorical but loaded, hit its mark. The press room quieted, no one eager to be seen siding with Russian opportunism. And while Collins maintained her composure, the shift in tone was unmistakable. Outside the White House, the backlash against Schumer was now in full swing. What had begun as righteous indignation had curdled into political fallout. Editorial boards that had once given him the benefit of the doubt now turned on him, accusing the Senate Majority Leader of reckless partisan fear-mongering at a moment when global stability required clarity and vision. Leaks confirmed his behind-the-scenes effort to coordinate the anti-Trump narrative, and with Musk's tweet turning the tide, that effort now appeared nakedly self-serving. The hashtag #SchumerResign began trending across social media platforms, and polls released by the end of the week showed a sharp drop in his approval rating, even among moderate Democrats, who now viewed his attack as a miscalculation that had damaged both the party and the broader cause of Ukrainian support. In the space of 72 hours, the momentum had turned completely. Trump's plan was no longer just defensible, it was visionary. And Schumer, once the voice of institutional resistance, now found himself on the defensive, outmaneuvered in a game he thought he still controlled. Chapter 6. President Trump for his creative and bold thinking. In Kyiv, President Volodymyr Zelensky, ever the wartime tactician, initially treaded carefully, watching the political firestorm in Washington unfold with cautious distance. But as the media narrative began to shift and the momentum of support behind Trump's proposal grew, fueled by Musk's high-profile endorsement, Caroline Leavitt's deft messaging, and a growing chorus of independent experts, Zelensky made his move. He issued a public statement that struck a masterful balance between diplomatic gratitude and sovereign assertion. Standing before a backdrop of the Ukrainian flag and flanked by Energy Ministry officials, he thanked President Trump for his creative and bold thinking, a phrase that carried both flattery and strategic alignment. Zelensky emphasized that the true goal was securing Ukraine's energy future, especially in the face of unrelenting Russian aggression. He carefully but deliberately corrected the Western media's framing of the plan, stating unequivocally that the ongoing discussions were about partnership and security, not ownership, and certainly not the exploitation that figures like Senator Schumer had dramatically suggested. His tone was calm, statesmanlike, subtly reminding the international community that Ukraine was not a pawn in a transatlantic pissing match, but an independent actor making hard decisions in wartime. Meanwhile, far to the east, Vladimir Putin watched these developments with barely concealed rage. In private, he was said to have erupted, an uncharacteristic show of temper that sent aides scrambling and intelligence analysts in the West quietly celebrating. Trump's maneuver had blindsided him. For all of Russia's attempts to destabilize Western unity, here was a former American president outmaneuvering Moscow not with tanks, but with tech deals and public diplomacy. Even the mere possibility of American partial ownership of Ukrainian energy infrastructure, particularly a plant as strategically vital as Zaporizhzhia, represented a significant blow to Russian leverage. In response, Putin's press secretary issued a flurry of sternly worded statements denouncing American imperialism and warning of dire consequences should U.S. companies attempt to entrench themselves in what Moscow still considered its sphere of influence. But the bluster rang hollow. The world had heard this refrain before, and this time the context was different. Trump's PR offensive had been meticulously executed, Zelensky's endorsement had given it moral weight, and even European leaders, some of whom had initially bristled at the idea, were beginning to reframe the conversation as one of post-war reconstruction, not political opportunism. The optics were working, the facts increasingly were working. And for the first time in weeks, it was the Kremlin that appeared reactive, cornered, and uncharacteristically short of options. Chapter 7. Rump, in a triumphant address from the Oval Office, spoke of a new era of American leadership. In the end, the political drama that had gripped Washington for weeks reached its inevitable, thunderous climax. Under withering pressure from both sides of the aisle, battered by a relentless media cycle and reeling from internal party backlash, Senator Chuck Schumer stood before a bank of cameras in a hastily arranged press conference outside the Capitol, his shoulders hunched under the weight of a career in free fall. The official statement cited health reasons, but no one in the room or watching across the country believed that for a second. The real reason was written across every headline, every editorial, every polling number that had cratered in the wake of his failed smear campaign. His credibility was in ruins, his political capital evaporated, his power base fractured beyond repair. His attempt to weaponize outrage had backfired spectacularly, and now he was the one left holding the smoking remnants of a narrative he could no longer control. Just hours later, in a scene staged for maximum symbolic resonance, Donald Trump addressed the nation from behind the resolute desk, the Oval Office bathed in warm, late-afternoon light, the American flag positioned just so over his right shoulder. With the measured confidence of a man who had not only survived the firestorm but emerged stronger from it, he declared the dawn of a new era of American leadership, one rooted not in endless aid or empty slogans, but in strength, innovation, and strategic partnerships. He spoke directly to the American people, but his words were aimed far beyond the nation's borders toward Moscow, Brussels, and Kiev. In his announcement, Trump revealed that his administration had reached a formalized framework agreement with the Ukrainian government, a bold, unprecedented partnership that would see American companies, including Tesla and other energy tech firms, invest heavily in Ukraine's devastated energy sector. In return, the U.S. would gain access to critical minerals vital to the green energy transition and future technological dominance, resources that, until now, had remained largely untapped due to war and instability. But more than that, the deal served a higher strategic function. It placed key infrastructure under the protective umbrella of American interest, providing not just aid but deterrence, a message to Putin that further aggression would now come with a far higher cost. It was, in effect, a geopolitical triple play: economic stimulus, national security enhancement, and global influence consolidation, all wrapped in the language of innovation and sovereignty. And as Trump concluded his address with a line that would be replayed endlessly in the days to follow, "We are not occupying, we are empowering, we are not taking, we are investing. And together, we are building a future where freedom is powered, quite literally, by partnership." The world understood that a shift had occurred. The chaos had crystallized into a new order. And for the first time in a long time, Washington, fractured and cynical though it remained, had witnessed a playbook rewritten in real time, with Trump, Musk, and an unlikely alliance standing atop the final act. Chapter 8. Trump and Musk. Within 20 minutes, Elon Musk arrived at the White House, slipping into the Oval Office with the calm precision of someone accustomed to high-stakes rooms. He looked slightly rumpled, his blazer faintly creased, the collar of his shirt skewed just enough to hint at a rushed transit, but there was no mistaking the sharp alertness in his eyes. They flicked across the room, absorbing everything: the subtle tension in the air, the faint scent of leather and power, the way Trump reclined just a bit too comfortably in his chair, like a man staging dominance. Musk extended a hand, shaking Trump's with the briskness of formality, then offered a minimal, almost dismissive nod to Schumer, whose jaw tensed slightly at the gesture. The atmosphere, thick already, took on a static charge as the three of them settled in. Trump was the first to speak, leaning back in his chair, hands steepled over his stomach, his expression that familiar blend of amusement and calculated provocation. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice rolling through the room like a warm engine, "Chuck here seems to think we've got a problem on our hands. AOC and Bernie, going around on their little media crusades, tossing out words like oligarchs and traitors at us like candy at a parade." He chuckled, low and derisive, shaking his head with theatrical disbelief. "It's absurd. Elon, you're the victim here, really. Just a guy trying to innovate, trying to build a better future. And these people, these demagogues, are clawing at your ankles like crabs in a bucket." Musk didn't smile, didn't blink. He remained impassive, his voice even and devoid of inflection. "It's distracting, unhelpful, but I'm used to it. Building anything that matters attracts heat. I've seen it before." He paused, eyes locking with Trump's for a moment, then drifting to Schumer. "This isn't new. What's different now is the volume." Schumer, who had been silent thus far, shifted forward in his seat. His posture was tense, shoulders drawn tight, eyes scanning both men before he spoke. "It's more than just noise, Mr. Musk," he said, the words coming fast, as if he'd been holding them in too long. "It's not just criticism, it's corrosion. They're undermining the public's faith in the system itself, and it's working. I've seen the data, the protests, the online activity, the rhetoric. They're not just frustrated anymore, they're radicalized. It's systemic now, viral. If we don't get ahead of this, if we don't reframe the narrative, we risk losing control, not just of the political discourse, but of public order." He looked pointedly at Musk. "People listen to you. You have reach. You have mythos. If you speak, they'll hear it." Musk's brow twitched, just slightly, betraying a flicker of something, annoyance maybe, or contemplation. "I didn't come here to play politics. I build rockets and cars. I run companies. I'm not here to solve Washington's messaging crisis." Trump raised a hand in a half-dismissive wave, grinning. "But you're already in it, Elon. Whether you like it or not, you're part of the story. You've got more influence than most countries. When you tweet, markets move. When you speak, the world listens." These people, they don't see a CEO. They see a king with a flamethrower. That made Musk snort, just barely, but he didn't respond. Instead, his gaze shifted to the fireplace, to the portrait of Lincoln looming above it. A long pause filled the room. Then Schumer leaned in further, lowering his voice. "We're not asking you to lie. Just clarify. Recenter the conversation. Make it clear that tearing down institutions won't lead to utopia, that chaos isn't progress. Musk turned back toward him slowly, his expression unreadable. What do I get out of it? The question hung in the air like smoke. Trump chuckled again, tapping a finger on the polished desk. You get to keep building. You get protection, leverage, and you get to remind the world that you're not the villain they're looking for. Another beat passed. Musk inhaled through his nose, then exhaled slowly. I'll think about it, he said, but I'm not going to be your puppet, not for this. Schumer opened his mouth to respond, but Trump raised a hand, stopping him. That's fair, he said, his voice now lower, more serious. But think fast. The clock's ticking, and if we don't move soon, they will. Musk gave a small nod, then turned and walked out of the room as silently as he had entered, leaving Trump and Schumer in the charged silence of power recalibrating itself.